Hey everybody, welcome back. I have a site investigation video for you today. Before we begin, I want to say hi to all the new subs. Thanks guys for checking out the channel. I really appreciate it. I see I've gained some new people since my last upload. Sorry to leave everyone hanging with that one. I had a little work to do over the last weekend, had some overtime to do, and in my downtime I've been trying to read a little bit more of Graham Hancock and Robert Bivall's book, The Master Game. I've been trying to look at some more photos, talking with you guys. I've been trying to catch up with the other researchers' videos and getting into arguments in their comment sections. You know, the usual stuff. Thanks to Ben over at the Uncharted X channel for his shout out in his last Younger Dryas video. Really appreciate that. Thanks to Philip over at the Ancient Alternative View for all his help in researching this video and all the good feedback he's been giving me lately and the dialogue we've had. Lastly, thanks to you guys for all the great discussions we've been having. I'm learning a lot and discovering a lot with your all's help. Ziggy Dan, Ryan, Sherman A. Osborne, Mike, Nancy, all you other guys, the usual gang. I really appreciate you guys checking out my channel and leaving comments and suggestions. And I like seeing you guys in the other researchers' comments. I like bouncing ideas off of you guys over there. So for all of you new guys, my name is Andrew. You've probably seen me in the other researchers' comments. Maybe that's how you found me. I don't monetize. I don't advertise on my channel. It's all free information and just sharing photos, videos, and ideas. You guys are more than welcome to give me feedback and criticisms on any information that I present. As always, I started this channel as a discussion hub for investigating ancient mysteries and megalithic architecture and for criticizing the mainstream narrative of history. So please check out the videos and lectures in my playlist tab. I've collected a lot of good ones in there. And please check out all the researchers in my channels tab. Those are all the guys that I subscribe to and who I try to have a dialogue with and who I try to learn from. So thank you guys again, and let's start the video. So today we're going to go to a part of the world we have not looked at yet, Cambodia, and a temple complex that maybe you all haven't heard of, Koh Ker. Now, I'm sure we've all heard of Angkor Wat and some of the larger, more famous locations. This one seems to be lesser known and in more rural area. The most impressive feature at this site is this 7-tiered pyramid, but there are also some very interesting stone structures, temples, and also some waterworks, some artificial reservoirs. So this is a very well-engineered site. Now you guys, as always, are free to read this in your own time. You can pause it or go to the Wikipedia yourself. I did want to highlight a couple things down here. Parasat Tam or Prang, both seem to be the same attribution here, the 7-layered pyramid. Probably some of the parts of it were built before 921 AD. And down here, the 7-layered pyramid, probably the state temple. A lot of probablys, right? So free to interpret that as you will. This is the Wikipedia article again. I will link you all to an alternative article that I found, pretty interesting here, by Sam, see if I can pronounce his last name, Osmanagich, and some pretty interesting information, pictures, and proposals on this article. So give this a look. I'll put the link to this in the description. Some aerial views here. Can't really find many of those on Google. It's pretty interesting. It shows the artificial reservoir here. So we'll look at more pictures, but good article. Please look at this one. If you guys go to my YouTube channel and go to the playlist tab, you'll see lah.ru Koh Ker 4K. These are the 2 videos from the LAH Russian researchers. Best footage on the internet of some of the temples and the pyramid. They walk up to the top of the pyramid. I highly recommend you watch these 2 because these 2 videos are the whole reason why I'm making this video, because the footage of the pyramid, especially some of the features at the top, blew me away, and it's what got me looking into the temples around it. And we're going to propose some things here at the end, maybe some interesting connections across continents again. So let's look at some photos. We'll save the pyramid for last because I'll probably do the most talking on it. But the temples around it are very interesting, and we're going to try to spot some hallmarks and architectural motifs like we've seen in the previous videos, and we can discuss in the comments what the implications are, the fact that they are here. So let's begin. Now, when looking at the temples, you're going to come across some that look like this, brick constructions. Now, these are very impressive, and they do have some stone elements in them, but today I want to focus on the megalithic and the really precisely cut stone block structures. I think those are the most impressive, and I'm going to propose they're the oldest. Yes, these are the structures that really draw my attention. The other ones, the brick ones, they are impressive, but this stuff is really mind-blowing. Now, right away, you guys see the holes, the small circular holes in the blocks. Now, in other sites, we see them as square holes, but at this site, almost exclusively, we see round holes. Small ones, large ones, different arrangements and orientations like this. Groups of 4, sometimes groups of 2, usually groups of 2, but also singular examples. So, very interesting connection technique, and by that I mean that they would more than likely have had pegs here. I'm not sure what material, metal of some kind, perhaps, to connect all the pieces together and hold them together and make it a very sound structure, and it would resist earthquakes and cataclysms. But also with metal, if it was metal, that would make them very valuable. So in times of hardship and warfare, invading and raiding peoples might come and destroy the temples to get the metal out of the structures. I like that idea. I think that explains some of this damage at sites that some people might be proposing as cataclysm. I agree, some of it might be, but other parts we have to include the possibility that during times of warfare and hardship that the metal was very valuable at these sites, and if they were in the structures, people were going to get them out. Now, looking at the motifs of the structure, very interesting things going on here. First of all, I'm sure you all see these window elements. They look like banisters. They look very Indian. You know, some more sites like Warangal in India have a lot of these banister-like elements. They look turned on a lathe. I'm not sure if they were, but they definitely look pretty uniform like they were. There's interesting motifs around the doorways, the incised motif, like we've seen at a lot of other sites. You see it around the windows too. It's an interesting motif that seems to be global. And also above the lintel, you see the space above. Now, we talked about this in some of the earlier videos, that this is an architectural design feature to disperse the load off the lintel, but it also is a decorative motif. So very interesting that it's here in Cambodia, even though we've seen it in Greece and all across Europe into Egypt, and we can even propose some sites in South America are utilizing this as well. Here's another angle with some different lighting. You can see these holes again. It's obviously a peg and hole system to connect the pieces together, and all the little connections, whatever they were, wood, metal, other pieces of stone, it's all gone. So I don't see any broken off pieces, so I'm going to say it's probably not stone. More than likely a metal, and it's gone because it was valuable or it rotted and rusted away. The banister features, again, you can see them in a little better light. They look pretty uniform. Some of them might be a little off from each other, but for the most part, they look pretty uniform. Could be turned on a lathe, could be cast. What about these blocks? Are we going to invoke geopolymer at this site? I'm going to leave it open. We're going to see some more examples later on of some more blocks and some of the way they're processed and how tightly they're fitted together, and I'll let you guys decide. So you can see how some of these columns fit together and how some of these lintels, cornice elements, how they work, how some of these fit together with square hole and peg systems, but also the round holes. A lot of it's ruinous here. It looks like the inside of this completely collapsed. Most of the temples around here do look collapsed like this. Here's a good photo of the window elements, really detailed close-up photo. I mean, they look pretty good to me, guys. What do you think? That stuff looks pretty uniform. And the surface treatments on some of these stones, very interesting kind of I said to some of the other commenters, I said this looks like a rippled appearance on the surface of some of these stones. Whatever that means, whatever that implies, the surface of some of these stones have like a rippled, wrinkled texture to them. So keep an eye out for that. Very tight fitment on some of these blocks over here. Do you even see a seam at some of these points? We'll zoom in again. That seam is pretty straight and pretty tight. There is some mortar in some of these temples, but most of it is dry laid. That's what we're looking for. No mortar. That is a later, cruder technique. Stone on stone is the most sophisticated and difficult technique. Another interesting temple with a lot more of this rubble out front. Almost seems like a darker stone, but has the circular holes again. In this case, there's a lot of singular examples, but a few pairs as well. The structure itself, very nicely put together, very ornately inscribed, embellished on the surface, along with very interesting statuary elements on both sides. Again, you see the incised motif around the gate, the doorway. An interesting small opening. You see this? These two small stones and these two L-shaped stones create this little space. That's an interesting motif execution. And then, of course, the larger space. I'm sure there was more structure here in the past that has collapsed, but you can see how this was created. Kind of like the Royal Kurgan and Kerch and some of those other sites, the Dolos tombs. They have these interesting blocks that have the decorative cornice elements, carvings on the inside. This one's very impressive. You can see 2 stories, and again, the incised motif around all the doors and windows. And again, sorry for the grainy photo, but you can see there is a triangular space above the lintel here now, but a motif that seems to echo all across the site. Another temple, very ruined, very collapsed. Not much of the original pieces left. Looks like some trees that had to be cut down. It was very invasive, but you can see what was the original footprint. The large doorway here. It's now being supported by the wooden beams. Some very large flanking stones. Not so large of a lintel stone, but there are some other, like these almost look T-shaped, like Göbekli Tepe stones again. Very impressive stuff. Like this piece down here, very impressive cuts. And again, we'll zoom in. This is a nice photo. You can see the surface treatment. Is this just scratch marks, pick marks from tools? Some other kind of processing? We're going to see this on the pyramid as well. A lot of this wrinkled texturing on the surface. Here's a great photo of some doorways. You can see the incised motif clearly. And if you zoom in, we'll see some other interesting little features here at the top. The row of holes for other architectural elements, perhaps, like a cornice or some type of coping stone. You can see in the gate in the background another set, and other odd holes. Some of this stuff around the lichen, you can see there, those might be holes as well. So gates and embellishments on this in the past that are no longer here. In the Wikipedia, it does say that there was a lot of looting at this site, so there may be a lot of statuary elements that used to be here that are no longer here. This picture, I think, shows an example of what might be going on with some looted elements. These square holes. Now this may be for timbers for holding up the roof, but this seems to be outside on like an awning, the front. Maybe a small stone addition, but also maybe some statuary stuff. So we could be seeing the remnants of where something was affixed to the front of the structure, statuary or architectural, no longer there. It's hard to find any photos of any of these intact. So if you guys find where there's either a porch or maybe some kind of statue here, I'd like to see that. I want to see how this originally was. But I'm assuming it was for the connection of something. And you can see on these columns here how they go together with a peg and socket connection. And the remnants over here, maybe this is eroded, that's why we can see, I don't see a peg on that side, but here obviously a peg and socket system. That is at many other sites. I saw that at Qasr Al Abd, and I've seen that all over the world. You see that at Stonehenge. So yeah, see, here's another one with the missing element, whatever it was. But obviously it was very impressive. They cut out these blocks to create these holes in a way to affix something, I assume. But also some interesting blocks laying around. We're going to look at that in a second, that have some interesting processing marks in them. I think they look pretty precise. The structure itself, pretty straight, I would say, pretty precise, no mortar. So very impressive structure here. All the embellishments, they look pretty old, so maybe the decoration is contemporary with building of the structure and not a later embellishment. Ah, there's a good nub for you. That's the top of a column that's fallen over. And then this stone's pretty interesting, has two holes and a central fluting in it. That's interesting, probably for fitting on top of a channel on a lower course perhaps. So this thing fits together like Legos, very impressive. Kind of like bevel blocks, but this site is mostly, almost entirely finely dressed stones. There is a couple instances of bevel blocks on the pyramid, but we're going to look at that at the end. And one more example here. Square holes, but missing element. And perhaps on the inside there are some as well. So maybe some of these are for beams, square, rectangular, wooden beams, stone beams for supporting an extra roof, but perhaps also for statues. But I really don't know. I have not seen any photos that would tell me. And one more collapsed temple here with the incised motif around the gate. And it's collapsed, but you can still see the remnants of what was a triangular space above the lintel. This one has fallen over, but this one's still in place. Very interesting. And I believe there's a stone above. Yeah, that one has some interesting scooping in it, maybe, perhaps, and obviously a hole in the one above. Some of these have just random holes in them, but I don't really understand what they could have been for, but maybe there were also pegs and hooks and other attaching implements for other banners and all kinds of things that we're not thinking of and that we just don't see. So here is what appears to be a collapsed hypostyle hall like you would see in Egypt, but there's also one in Chichen Itza in South America. But look at some of these blocks. See how they connect. The square holes, the lintels, these are the fallen lintel pieces like over here. They connected with these square holes onto the square pegs of the columns to make a very sturdy connection, so avoids cataclysms and earthquakes pretty well. So the fact that they are toppled like this would have taken some severe forces. Not just the trees, they seem to grow around the trees just fine. So for these to have been knocked over, this is either human intervention or cataclysm, I'm going to have to say. Some interesting blocks here. You see this one has some kind of bevel in it. I'm not sure if that's the same kind of bevels as in our bevel blocks, but it's a processing mark. It's very interesting. It's pretty straight too. It's probably done with a saw. I can see no other way of that being done. I see in the background here this gateway does not have the square holes like the other ones do. That's interesting. Another angle, photo not as good, but you can see this whole row has fallen over. And you see some of these blocks in the background here. I'm not sure if these are the exact blocks, but in the LAH video, you will see that there are some interesting holes in some of these blocks. Kind of random. I'm not sure what those would have been for, except for maybe some kind of decorative panel, maybe some plaques or something of some kind. Here's a cool photo just because it shows this doorway does not have one of those spaces above it, those relieving spaces. So the fact that this is still intact, that's pretty impressive to me. That's a very large stone above, and you see more of the pegs for connection points for something. Some more toppled column pieces. These have some interesting, some filigree. Well, I think it's filigree. We'll look at some other photos where it definitely is, but some spiral motifs at least, or some kind of decorative motifs in here. And I think this is that same doorway, but looking in the opposite direction. And again, you can see some of these more porous looking stones. These have some interesting anomalies in them, but you can really only see them in the LAH video. One thing I do want to point out, the little perimeter wall here. Now, there's something I'm going to propose at the end of the video after we look at the pyramid, but for now, I just want you all to notice this little perimeter wall, and there's more of them than just this one. But the technique that was used to put it together, it's a double thick wall, so one ashlar block and another ashlar block, and then on top a faceted cornice or coping stone for the top. Some of it's very nicely carved, other parts are very rough. I'm not sure if this is just crude or if it's weathered, but just keep this in mind for now. The fact that there's these faceted coping stones on top of a double thick wall, and we might see that at another site very far away from here. Now, real quick before we look at the pyramid, I want to look at the inside of some of these temples and some of these really nicely decorated features here. I'm not sure if this is all just stone or some of it might be plaster, but some of the temples still have some of these beautiful artistic panels inside. And what they depict is pretty interesting. I think some of this stuff looks kind of Sumerian, the way these guys have these wings and these little skirts. I'm not sure if that's a fish scale skirt like Owanes, but an interesting little skirt and double winged creatures. Now, the pyramid was said to have been decorated with a lot of statues, but most of them have been looted, and you can only see them in some private museums. And here's another one of those same winged genie creatures, maybe bird-headed. You can see the skirt that it has. Maybe those are feathers, maybe those are scales, but very eerily similar to perhaps some South American and maybe Sumerian gods. Just something to think about. Save that for some other channels that can talk about that more in depth. But while we are on the topic of some of this artistic stuff, I would like to point out some anomalies in some of the stones. This obviously is the Angkor region, not near Koh Ker, but look at the circular holes in some of these blocks. Does anyone find that interesting? What could that be for? Was that for some kind of attachment, a decorative, maybe a headband or more statuary stuff? Not sure. Why is it only in those blocks? And then in this one is very interesting. Look at these lower blocks. What's going on here with these? Why do these blocks have these? And what's going on with the surface of these? Very pitted, right? Is that from picks? Not sure. Very interesting artwork, very well done. Some of it very fine, detailed. Now, I'm sure you all see the beautiful figure, but look at the border. Look at the filigree on the border and how intricate that is. Very impressive stuff. Looks like Baalbek. That's what it reminds me of. Here as well, look at this. Very intricate carving. Very intricate. Reminds me a lot of Baalbek and also Warangal Fort in India as well. Now here's a really interesting temple that has an interesting feature inside, a lingam. But before we go inside, I want to look at this pile of rocks out front. Very interesting stones. They have some square cutouts in them and perhaps some interesting processing marks. Some of it looks maybe kind of molded. I'm not sure what's going on with these blocks or why they're here, where they originally went. Perhaps they've been broken. Perhaps I see this might have gone together in the past. Not sure. Rows of holes though, very interesting. Very weird looking stones here. Looking up a little bit more, you see the doorway, relatively simple, trapezoidal. Inside is a lingam. We're going to see better photos of that. Very interesting object, and some more of the rubble in front here. Very interesting rubble. Perhaps upper elements of the temple that have collapsed. Perhaps a statue that was out front. I'm not sure. So this is the lingam inside of this temple. Now this thing is fascinating. I'm sure you all know the lingam in Indian mythology, but if you don't, I recommend looking up Praveen Mohan and Phenomenal Travel Videos. A lot of good videos on the lingam there. Just search for it. But this one, very precisely carved, some interesting marks in it, and then of course the very intricate filigree all around the base here. I find that really impressive. As a woodworker, I've done some of this stuff in wood, so to see it in stone like this and like Baalbek, very impressive stuff. And here you can see an interesting incisement here. You saw the ring around the back. It comes around to the front and goes up. back down. Very symmetrical, very geometric, nice radiuses, so very impressive. And then in the background, in the structure itself, I want to point out some blocks. Small filler stones at corners, right guys? We've seen this in almost every ancient megalithic structure. They have these small filler stones at corners. It's like a hallmark of the engineers, of their building process. And then of course the surface treatment on some of these stones again, these scratch marks or pitted surfaces, wrinkles, ripples. Another angle to show you this, I'm not sure if the whole thing is monolithic rock, part of the bedrock, or if this is just a large piece of stone that was drug in and then worked and then backfilled, because you see some repair blocks underneath. Maybe some of this is broken away from the original monolithic block, but it's hard to tell unless, of course, someone excavated. But you can see in the background some more of the scratch marks, better lighting here. Some interesting little pits and scoops, maybe depressions in some of the blocks as well. Very interesting. And one more photo of the front of it, close up. Sorry, it's kind of blurry, but you can see the filigree. On this side, it's a lot more weathered. The back, it's a lot more intact. But you can still see here this size motif and how symmetrical it is, seeing it face on like this. Very impressive carving. So now we'll transition to the pyramid here at the complex. Now, I mentioned those lingams in preparation for this because if you read in the history, supposedly on top of this pyramid, there was a lingam in the past. And I'm not sure you see some other sites, Angkor, that have other round temple elements that could be called lingams. Like, are we talking about that, some kind of hollow interior space, or are we talking about lingams like what we just looked at, some kind of knob or monolithic rock formation? And if that's the case, how did they drag such a thing up here? So we'll look at more photos. Here's a great aerial photo here, one of the better ones. We'll zoom in a little bit. Can't really find many aerial photos, and this one was before it was restored. So you can see it's pretty overgrown, but it's very impressive, very geometric. It reminds me of a lot of South American pyramids, step pyramids in Egypt, obviously. The row arrangement, very interesting. The courses, you have 11 courses in the first layer, 13 courses in the second, and all the rest are 11 as well as the first. So all 11, 13 on this one. What does that imply? I'm not sure. I haven't looked into the numerology and that kind of stuff in the other pyramids, but if there's any other kind of row arrangement where they're all the same except for one, I think that'd be a really interesting connection to propose if anyone wants to do that research. But what does it mean here? I'm not sure, but one of the courses happens to be different than all the others by 2 blocks. So here you can see the original stairway. There's a very large stairway. Now we have to have this small wooden stairway because the original's collapsed. Some of it at the top you can still see is pretty intact. The blocks are really impressive. Some of the rows are a little bit different than others. You can see these are smoother. This one is a little more puffy. These, I think, I'm going to propose look like bevel blocks, and when we get closer, we'll see some more. Mainly at the corners, where it's most prominent. They seem to kind of morph in and out of finely dressed and beveled blocks, almost like South American blocks. And at the end of the video, we're going to propose maybe a connection to South America, so stay to the end for that. Now in the LAH video, they start walking up to the pyramid, and it's not very obvious, not very apparent until they start getting closer and you start realizing the details of the blocks. And some things start popping out right away. First of all, look at this nub. That's a very strange knob sticking out of that stone. Seems to be the only one like it. I didn't see any others in the structure like that. Very interesting. If there's others that are knocked off, there could be, but I don't see any remnants on any blocks either. Some blocks have bevels here. Down here, these are clearly bevel blocks, like what we see in the Middle Eastern sites. So what are these blocks doing so far away? They have the same scratch marks. These could be the same blocks from the Elephantine Island Nilometer. They look exactly the same. But then you have other blocks that have circular holes in them, the pairs again. A lot of them have the pairs of holes. And I'm really not sure what's going on with those. Could they have been fixtures in the past, anchor points for something? Have to assume that. I have no other purpose for those. Can't think of anything. This is the other corner with great lighting, and here you can see more of the holes, the circular holes. Sometimes there's two, sometimes there's one. You can see some of the blocks have the scratch marks, especially over here on the the right hand corner, but they've been broken away. They fit together really well. I don't think any of them, if there is any mortar, it's got to be later patchwork repair mortar, because this structure appears to be stone on stone, dry laid completely. Some interesting incising and processing lines. It's heavily worn, some more of the wrinkled surfacing. Some of the surface is sloughing off. That's interesting. So the pitted surface, the wrinkled surface, when it sloughs off, it becomes this smooth, rounded surface. Looks more South American. That's interesting. And looking up the pyramid, you can see more blocks with scratch marks and low nubs and strange indentations, I'll say, some kind of indentation. It's hard to see here, but there'll be other pictures. But strange processing marks, odd row arrangements, block dimensions. See these wider rows, then these narrower rows interspersed. Is that a structural technique, a design technique, more than likely? Yeah, here you go. Here's the staircase. This is very impressive. Look at some of these blocks on the left-hand side. You see the scoop marks or the indentations in some of the blocks here, and here, these horizontal ones, and then some of the smaller holes in them and up. Very tightly configured, but these are all cracked. Whatever happened to cataclysm, maybe. I want to stop and show you all a couple timestamps from the LAH video. Now, here around the 5-minute mark, you can see they're on one of the levels here, and the odd processing on the surface of these blocks and how tightly they're fitted. Up here, these circular and oval depressions in the blocks, and then these horizontal depressions that form a decorative band, a cornice or a coping piece all the way around, like a railing. And then below as well, some more odd flaking or pitting in the surface. Very strange blocks. And then below you can see more of the bevel lines, very precise, narrow bevels. Very interesting blocks. And then here, look at the fitment. That's his hand, and then these are 3 blocks. That is really precise. You can't even see the line here. Very precise. So then we get to the top of the pyramid, and that's when things get a little crazy, because now we see lots of holes and a central shaft that goes all the way down the pyramid. And you'll see in the LAH video they throw stones down it, and it's pretty deep. I think it goes all the way down. I've never seen any photos inside of it. I don't know what's down there or what's in there. If you guys find any information, I'd love to hear it. So these are really big blocks up here. They're just as big as the rest of the blocks in the pyramid, maybe even larger. They have the holes in them, circular and square holes, in what appears to be some kind of technical configuration. I want to say there was definitely something up here, that these were used as a scaffolding or a connection point for something. I don't know what that was, but there was something up here, and whatever it was, it involved a lot of scaffolding or a lot of connection points. And you'll also see down here some of this finely carved statuary stuff. This extends around the backside. They are those winged genie creatures again, like we saw in that private museum photo. Very large, and they went together in segments, again with the same connection techniques, but they've obviously been looted. Here you go, here's that angle. You can see underneath the rubble some more of the statuary stuff, those winged genie creatures, and the holes and peg systems that were used to connect the upper pieces. And you notice that some of the blocks have a different surface treatment than others. So the rippled stones on some of these, other ones are flat, other ones are kind of porous. Very interesting stuff. Now this block in the background, interesting cutouts, right? And precise bevel lines in it. Those are bevel blocks. I don't know how else you would describe these. They're not like our other ones, but they they show some kind of high-tech processing or very skilled technique here to create these flat surfaces and these precise margins and all these little holes again, whatever they were for. And looking down into the pit, you see some more of the porous looking stones, and then the smoother stones with bevels and holes going down into this pit. Very impressive. It's small, but it goes all the way down, I'm assuming, to the bottom with smaller stones. That's interesting, but larger flanking stones on top, capstones. So what was the original configuration on top? Was there a hatch? Was there a ladder? Was there water? I'm not sure what went on with this hole. Very interesting though. And then more blocks with holes in them and rippled surfaces, scratched, wrinkled surfaces. And I love this photo. I don't know who took this photo, but I'm so glad they did. It's an amazing lighting, and you can see the surface on all these blocks. See how rippled they are and wrinkled? It might be just chisel marks and then lots of rain and weathering, but I just find it to be a very interesting surface texture on these blocks. So now we're going to jump to Peru, and this is the Ushnu Pyramid. Now we looked at this in one of my previous episodes, and there are some interesting things going on in this pyramid. For example, some of the blocks have little nubs on them. See those two blocks and the nubs on them? Some of the only blocks like that in the structure, but that's just very interesting. And small filler stones at corners. See that? There's more of them in the structure if you look for a while. But what I want to look at in relation to Koh Ker in Cambodia is these small structures in front here. These two little square rectangular structures and how they're built. Now, it's a wall with a faceted capstone, right? Just like some of those walls around Koh Ker. And I'm going to link you guys to this other article. I wanted to save this for the end. This Blue Sky Limit. Kim here, thank you so much for this article. First of all, holy crap, look at this. There are bevel blocks in Peru, legitimate bevel blocks. Now, what are these? Are these legacy bevel blocks? I'm gonna have to say so. They don't have any anomalies in them, no square holes, no weird angles. They're not very tightly fitted. There's some space in between them. There is an interesting older element there, whatever that is, maybe. That definitely looks like something from South America, but these blocks do not fit, do they? Those should be in the Middle East. Now, did the Spanish do this after they conquered? And this is a legacy or some kind of hallmark saying this is the blocks like we had back in Europe? I'm not sure. I'm not sure why these are here. Did they bring them with them from Europe as ballast on their ships? I don't know, guys. This one really threw me for a loop. What are bevel blocks doing in Peru? We've seen the polygonal puffy blocks, and that's a little bit different, but these are exactly like ones in Middle East and Europe. But anyway, that's getting a little off topic. The reason why I want to bring up this article is because this woman Kim has taken pictures. Well, first of all, I do want to bring this up. Small relief figures on stones, like on the Cholpa Towers, like on Göbekli Tepe stones. How about that? I love that she's pointed out the foliage growing in the holes. That's like what we look for. I'm not sure if that's why she was looking for it, but it's interesting. Ushnu Pyramid here. She went here. She took some good photos, some photos with some interesting processing marks, but in particular, the photo I want to look at, it shows these two little square structures here. Now, they're double thick walls, just like in Cambodia. Double ashlar blocks with the faceted top pieces. Now, I just can't see that being a coincidence. I can't see the two cultures arriving at this very specific building design separately. I think there had to be some connection. Like Charles Coss has talked about in his recent videos of an Irish connection to South America, and some of the pictures that he's shown, there's nubs on structures in Ireland. So the connections are coming out. It's not just me, there are other researchers pointing these out as well. And if that's not enough for you guys, looking at some other sites in Cambodia, trying to find some other connections, I found a couple of cool sites. Baksi, Cham Krong, and Ta Keo. Sorry if I mispronounced those, but there is some very interesting stuff going on here. First of all, let's look at this pyramid. Now, what do you guys see going on with these shadows? Do you think that's familiar to you? I thought that was eerily familiar to me. You know what this reminded me of? Anyone? Anyone else? Just me? Maybe? Okay. Let me know. This is obviously Ollantaytambo in Peru. Now this Baksi Cham Krong site, this pyramid, I think it's the most similar to the Koh Ker pyramid. I think the only other one in Cambodia that looks anything like it. You can see how this one has this interesting temple feature on top. Is this what they're talking about when they say there was a lingam on top? Or are we talking about something completely different? I'm not sure if this has a central shaft like Koh Ker, but if anyone finds that information, I'd love to know. Now the tops are brick, but the bottoms are heavily eroded, finely dressed, tightly fitted stones. And then there's this site, Ta Keo, which I think is the next closest to Koh Ker, and this site is really impressive. They say it was unfinished because you can see on some of the upper elements, it looks like they started the carving of the decorative motifs and inscribing, but they didn't get around to it. They just left it in a rough state. However, you will notice that there are these banister elements, these window elements that we've looked at Koh Ker. So why would they put those in? This seems like a late installation should be on a structure that's almost finished. So I'm not sure. You can see they're missing over here, but there's a few left. I'm assuming looters, right? This site's been looted as well, probably. But you can see the blocks of the courses are very similar to the Koh Ker pyramid. Another angle here, some different lighting. Really impressive structure. The fact that they did all this before they started the decorative inscribing, so the blocks are pretty rough at the top. Wow, you can see again here, look at this. There is a space above that lintel. Again, that hallmark design. Some of these weathered bands, some of these, at least they look weathered with these holes in them maybe. Interesting, some of the layers may have been eroded more than other layers. Different hardnesses of stone, perhaps. Very impressive, though. Some close-ups of the top. You can see how the architectural designs were going to be carved in later, perhaps? Or was this the final intention? I'm not sure. Another good angle here. Look, some really tight fitment and sharp angles. Was this going to be how it was going to be left? Or were they going to come back and carve in more elaborate motifs? I'm not sure. It looks really good even in this state. I'm going to say these are trapezoidal doorways as well, slightly trapezoidal perhaps. More scratch marks on the stairs. See that? Very nicely done. Or how about this site nearby, Prasat Kravan or Kravan, and it is just a brick structure, I know, so it could be later, but I want to point out some of the motifs here. Look above, you see the stair step header motifs with the false doors. That is almost a global phenomenon. Very interesting. And then finally, this is not my comparison photo. I found this on Google, but obviously someone else is thinking like us and they're finding these connections. So they're comparing it to South America here. Now, I'm pretty sure other researchers have proposed this. At least Hugh Newman, I know, has visited one of the Cambodian sites, and I know he's compared it to some South American sites. So I just want to, further that research and try to expand upon it and find some more links and help the other researchers. I think Charles has got some really good ideas going with the Irish connections, and even Hugh Newman and JJ have been talking about the Irish connection in the Americas as well. So I think we can dig into that vein of research a little bit deeper, and we'll find some really good connections and be able to help out the other researchers. So I hope you all appreciated this look at this site and some of these other sites around it in Cambodia. And let me know what you guys think about these connections that I proposed to South America. You think they might be pretty strong? You think there may be some better ones? Maybe look into Hugh Newman and JJ's research along with Charles Koss's and see what they propose, and let me know what you think of the strength of their arguments. So I appreciate you guys for hanging out with me, and we will talk to you next time.